Today I'll be teaching from this article that I recently wrote entitled Shocking Prophetic Revelation. Ezekiel 28 precedes Ezekiel 38, revealing the SIDON prophecy in Ezekiel 28 verses 20 through 26 and its Hezbollah connections. Now, most all commentaries teach that this prophecy has already found historical fulfillment, and as such it has been vastly overlooked by most of our commentators today. However, I don't agree, and today I'm going to give you the reasons why I think this is an unfulfilled, timely prophecy that is stage setting and could be the very next prophecy to find fulfillment. Now, I recommend as we go through this study together that you have your video in front of you, and on your left hand you have the article open that you can get from prophecydepot.com, and most importantly on your right hand have your Bible open to Ezekiel 28 verses 20 through 26, and the additional supporting verses we'll be going over today in this video. Now, many of today's top Bible prophecy teachers believe that Ezekiel 38 and 39 could be the next prophecy to find fulfillment. As you see from the image here, it lists a coalition of countries involving Russia, Turkey, Iran, Ethiopia. You see the list on the left-hand side. Populations listed by their ancient names on the map, their modern-day equivalents on the left-hand side. They're going to come and invade Israel in the latter days for plunder and booty, a very important prophecy. They form an outer circle of countries that don't share common borders with Israel. They've never been Israel's notorious enemies, but they will someday come together, led by Russia, to invade Israel. Now, unfortunately, the problem with fast-forwarding Ezekiel 38 and 39 to the front page of today's prophetic calendar, in the process of doing that, three important facts get overlooked. You can read along with me as we go through these facts in the article highlighted there. You see it. Fact number one is that apart from Iran, none of Israel's enemies in modernity, such as the Palestinians, Hezbollah, Syria, Hamas, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and Egypt, none of these countries are identified in Ezekiel 38 and 39. You saw the map before of that outer ring. Well, these countries form actually an inner circle of countries that share common borders with Israel. They've been Israel's enemies from time immemorial. They harbor an ancient hatred of the Jewish state. They always have. And they'll be involved in a different prophecy called Psalm 83, which I will be talking about a little bit in this video as we get going and identify Hezbollah probably in Psalm 83 as well. So that's fact number one. Now you can read along with me at fact number two that gets overlooked in the process, and that is that the Israel of today doesn't find itself in the required preconditions described in Ezekiel 38 verse 11, which is a land of unwalled villages, a peaceful people who dwell safely, all of them dwelling without walls, neither having bars nor gates. Israel today has walls and checkpoints internally as well as numerous border walls externally that have been put in place to protect the Jewish state from their evil Arab neighbors that we just listed in Psalm 83, that inner circle of countries. Another image to go over with that would be these preconditions are they must be regathered from the nations in the latter years, brought back from the sword into Israel, which had long been desolate. And we'll put a check mark on those conditions right there. They have found fulfillment, but the other ones which we just discussed have yet to find fulfillment. And that's they need to be a peaceful people living in a land of unwalled villages, dwelling securely without walls, bars, nor gates, having silver and gold and acquired livestock and goods, possessing booty and great plunder. Now, they're not dwelling securely without walls, bars, nor gates, as we just discussed. However, after the Ezekiel 28 SIDON prophecy, we're going to find that that changes, and Israel can meet these preconditions. That's fact number two. So fact number three is that the overlooked prophecy that we'll be studying today in Ezekiel 28 verses 20 through 26 needs to happen before Ezekiel 38, because when it happens, Israel will dwell securely, and those preconditions we just looked at in Ezekiel 38, 7 through 12 will be in place. Israel will dwell securely at that point. So this teaching video is going to take an in-depth look, among other things, at these passages in Ezekiel 28 verses 20 through 26, and in the process we're going to likely find that Hezbollah could be identified in these prophecies. So now let's turn our attention toward the terrorist group from Lebanon called Hezbollah. First, it's important to note that Hezbollah is they're committed to wiping Israel off of the map An article that came out in February of 2024 from Haaretz News says this in the headline. Nasrallah says Hezbollah is committed to fighting Israel until it is off the map. So we see Hezbollah is in the news, but could they be in the Bible? And moreover, could they actually be in Bible prophecy? Now, I believe the answer to this is yes. There are 3 and maybe 4 cities, coastal cities in Lebanon, that show up in 3 unfulfilled ancient biblical prophecies. The cities you see on the map are Tyre, which is 12 miles north of Israel's border; Sidon, the subject of much of our talk today, also known as Sidon, which is 25 miles north of Tyre, a mere 37 miles north of Israel's border; and Gebal, now called Byblos, which is 24 miles north of Lebanon's capital city of Beirut. Byblos is approximately 51 miles north of Sidon, to give you proximity of location. They're all on the coast. And the fourth is Zarephath, which you don't see on the map, but I'll show you that later on in the video. I believe it gets an honorable mention, and it'll be introduced later. And we're going to explore these prophecies and these cities in these prophecies throughout this video. So who is Hezbollah? You can see on the image here that they were founded in 1982, conceived by Muslim clerics and funded by Iran primarily to fight the Israeli invasion of Lebanon at that time. It's in Arabic, it means the Party of God. It's a Shia Islamic political party in Lebanon. It is also a paramilitary group. It's been led since 1992 by its Secretary General Hassan Nasrallah. Its paramilitary wing is the Jihad Council, and its political wing is the Loyalty to the Resistance Bloc Party and the Lebanese Party. But the important fact here is that its armed strength is assessed to be equivalent to that of a medium-sized army. Here's a headline that came out recently telling you just how many rockets they have, and some of these are precision-guided. Jerusalem Post tells us back in October of 2023. Now remember, Hezbollah got involved in fighting Israel on October 8th, the day after the Hamas massacre on October 7th. Hezbollah has up to 200,000 rockets aimed at Israel. The Institute for National Security Studies reveals Hezbollah's vast arsenal of precision missiles, UAVs, and tens of thousands of fighters. So they're a medium-sized army on the scale of world armies. They're world-class. Between July 12th to August 14th of 2006, Hezbollah launched over 4,000 missiles into northern Israel, causing many Israelis to seek shelter in bomb shelters for pretty much that whole month. Presently, the concerns are that Hezbollah could lob 6,000 missiles a day out of their 200,000 missile arsenal. Here's an article that came out in August of 2023, before the Hamas massacre, which is very telling. It says the predicted scenario, this is from the Israel National News, is 6,000 rockets at Israel could be fired during the first days of war with Hezbollah. Israel's defense establishment is preparing for the worst case scenario during a war on the northern border, which is going on right now, folks, as we record this, which would include days-long blackouts, hundreds dead, and thousands wounded. The article goes on to say, within the first few days, about 6,000 rockets could be launched at the Jewish state. As time progresses, the number would decline to about 1,500 to 2,000 rockets a day. Security experts estimate that every day there would be approximately 1,500 effective strikes in Israeli territory. That is, after subtracting rockets that statistically land in open areas and interceptions by the Iron Dome. As of June 27, 2024, it's been reported that approximately 7,400 cross-border attacks have occurred between Israel and Hezbollah, and the burgeoning conflict has necessitated the evacuation of nearly 80,000 Israelis from their homes in the northern cities of Israel. They're still wondering when they can return safely to these homes. Many of them are living as exiles still in their own country. Here's a headline that came out in January of 2024 from Haaretz that says, Israel emptied its north. Now officials fear evacuees won't return home after the war. It goes on to say nearly 80,000 people living near the Lebanese border were evacuated or fled during the Gaza war. Only 60% of them are sure they want to return, according to a survey. Now, I believe this evacuations are all part of phase 1 of Hezbollah's war campaign against Israel. Let's take a look at what I believe their goals are in phase 1, just to set the stage for phase 2, which is an all-out war, in my estimation, which I do believe will be coming soon. But let's look at phase one. The first thing they want to do is spread the IDF thin, Israeli Defense Forces thin, by diverting troops and important military resources to the north of Israel. They want to deplete some of Israel's missile defense systems, namely the Iron Dome. They want to create danger, chaos, and hysteria among the civilians living in northern Israel, which they've accomplished, forcing these Israelis to evacuate their homes into towns, which accomplishes the following. A, it renders them unavailable as combatants should Hezbollah initiate a ground war with hand-to-hand and house-to-house fighting. Remember that the Israelis, most of these Israelis that have evacuated, have all been in the military. They've got military combatant experience because it's a mandatory draft for men and women in Israel. So by getting them evacuated, they reduce the possibility that they'll have to fight them in hand-to-hand combat as they try to protect their houses from a ground invasion from the north, from Hezbollah. B, it makes them a refugee burden on the Israeli government and society. C, it affects tourism in northern Israel, devastating the economy. Well, tourism is at a standstill right now in Israel as we record this video. So these things have been accomplished. 4, the goal is to provide more time for the international community to unite in a propaganda media war against Israel, which we've seen that going on, the anti-Semitism in the college campuses in America as well as the United Nations, condemning Israel, and the ICC criminal court trying to indict Benjamin Netanyahu on war crimes. We've seen this is happening in the process of phase one of Hezbollah's campaign. 5, it gives Iran more time to arm their hypersonic ballistic missiles with nuclear weapons that are explicitly intended to wipe the Jewish state off of the map. So this is part of phase one, and I believe it's been accomplished by Hezbollah. Now we need to talk about potentially phase two. Now here's a couple of headlines that would lead us to be concerned that this is going to go into a full-scale war shortly. May happen by the time we even get this video up and running. It's that burgeoning that quickly. Headline from Al Jazeera, June 19, 2024. Israel is ready for an all-out war in Lebanon. The Israeli military says its Northern Command has approved operational plans for war with Lebanon. That was in June of 2024. Another article came out the day after in the Jerusalem Post. Strikes on Haifa and Tel Aviv. Hezbollah plan of attack if war erupts with Israel. So we can see this is a very livid situation. Phase one has been going on successfully with Hezbollah's campaign. Now it looks like all-out war could break out in Israel. Okay, so let's turn our attention to the important cities that could be involved in future Hezbollah prophecies. Hezbollah is based out of Lebanon, so if they are involved in ancient foretellings, it would be under the banner of Lebanon, Tyre, Sidon, Gebal, modern-day Byblos, or Zarephath. Zarephath you see sandwiched in between Sidon and Tyre in the yellow font on the map. It's important to note that the ancient cities of Tyre and Sidon still exist today. These are two sister cities that have appeared together in over 17 verses in the Old Testament, appeared together. So thus they are essentially joined at the hip when it comes to historical or prophetical accounts. So we'll talk about Sidon first. Sidon still exists today, as I stated. It is also known as modern-day Saida, S-A-I-D-A. It's the third largest city in Lebanon. It is also, Hezbollah has a sizable footprint there in the format of the Lebanese resistance brigades. Now it's important to talk about these brigades. They're a paramilitary group founded by Hezbollah in 1997. They have recently resurfaced, participating in the October 8 fight with Israel. They're composed of Sunni Muslims and non-practicing Shias. They were created to increase the manpower of anti-Israeli forces, to deny Israel freedom of movement in the non-Shia areas. Now, Sidon is overwhelming majority is Sunni, but the Lebanese resistance brigades involve Sunni Muslims who have sided with Hezbollah and the Shias terrorist group because of their common hatred of Israel. Moreover, these brigades fought over 300 operations against Israel from 1998 to 2000. They also fought in the Second Lebanon War in 2006, the summer of 2006. Subsequently, the brigades provided logistical support to Hezbollah during the Syrian civil war between 2011 and 2020, so they've been very active. By 2009, the group comprised mainly Sunni Hezbollah supporters from Sidon. Now, the image you see here shows that Sidon is an active region for the paramilitary activities of these resistance brigades. Their threatening existence in Sidon is likely why Israel has attacked Hezbollah infrastructure near this historic city. Yes, Hezbollah infrastructure is stationed inside of Sidon, and Israel has attacked them in that area there, and I'll show you some headlines on that shortly. But look at the image here to show you that from Wikipedia that Sidon is where one of the leaders of the brigades is, Mohammed Saleh. It's an active region. Follow the arrows. Down below it says they've been involved in the Hamas-Israel war since 2023, and the clash is going on currently between Lebanon and Israel. Now, I told you recently that Israel had attacked this nearby Sidon. Here's a couple articles about that. This is the Times of Israel on February of 2024, February 19th. The IDF strikes Hezbollah's arms depot deep inside Lebanon after drone attack on north. The Israeli Defense Forces, I'm reading on the right side of the slide, on Monday afternoon struck what it said were 2 weapon depots belonging to the Hezbollah terror group near Lebanon's southern coastal city of Sidon. So we see that Hezbollah is using Sidon to put weapons depots there. This is where they could have some of their precision-guided missiles. It's a threat to Israel. It's a stronghold of Hezbollah. So we Sidon and Hezbollah have a connection there. Moreover, the day after that article came out, this one came out this was on March 1st of this year, 2024. Al Jazeera says, as Israel strikes all around it, fear rises in Lebanon's Sidon. Reeling from successive crises, the people of Sidon worry that the next one could come in the form of Israeli bombs. So we see Sidon is also in the news. They are connected with Hezbollah. It's a stronghold of Hezbollah. So now we're going to take a look at the prophecy of Ezekiel 28, verses 20 through 26. Now it's time to look at the burden against Sidon in Lebanon by Ezekiel. We will be looking at Ezekiel 28, verses 20 through 22. Which states that, then another message came to me from the Lord. Son of man, turn and face the city of Sidon and prophesy against it. Give the people of Sidon this message from the sovereign Lord. I am your enemy, O Sidon, and I will reveal my glory by what I do to you, when I bring judgment against you and reveal my holiness among you. Everyone watching will know that I am the Lord. So in this opening passage, Ezekiel informs us that the Lord God is against Sidon. He actually calls Sidon his enemy. And as a result, he will execute judgments upon this historic city. Now these judgments will serve to glorify God in a manner that onlookers will realize that he is the holy God. Next, we're going to find out from Ezekiel. He's going to provide us with the manner and extent of these judgments. We're going to look at Ezekiel 28, verse 23. He says, I will send a plague against you, and blood will be spilled in your streets. The attack will come from every direction, and your people will lie slaughtered within your walls. Then everyone will know that I am the Lord. The New King James Version says it this way, for I will send pestilence upon her, and blood in her streets. The wounded shall be judged in her midst by the sword against her on every side. So it turns out that Sidon will be involved in a devastating conflict by the sword, which fills her streets with the blood of the slaughtered and the wounded. Now, the sword is often used as a biblical typology of war. So this verse now concludes, again, by repeating the detail that the defeated Sidonians will know that the Lord is the holy God. And in the ensuing verse, we're going to find out why the Lord is against Sidon. So we're going to turn our attention now to Ezekiel 28, verse 24. No longer will Israel's scornful neighbors prick and tear at her like briars and thorns, for then they will know that I am the sovereign Lord. New King James says, and there shall no longer be a pricking briar or a painful thorn for the house of Israel among all those who are around them who despise them. Then they shall know that I am the Lord their God. So it turns out that Sidon is a part of a group of surrounding Arab states that despise Israel. These surrounding Arabs are a painful thorn on Israel's side. Their hatred of Israel manifests into hostilities that Ezekiel likens to a pricking briar that hedges Israel in on all sides. These surrounding people share common borders with Israel, appear to be the pricking briar evil neighbors of Psalm 83. Now, according to Ezekiel 28, verses 25 through 26, The judgment upon Sidon seems to be the first in a series of successive judgments against the pricking briar nations surrounding Israel. Now, Ezekiel 28, verses 25 and 26 says the following. Thus says the Lord God, when I have gathered the house of Israel from the peoples among whom they are scattered, and am hallowed in them in the sight of the Gentiles, then they will dwell in their own land which I gave to my servant Jacob. And they will dwell safely there. They'll build houses and plant vineyards. Yes, they will dwell securely. But when? When I execute judgments on all those around them who despise them, then they shall know that I am the Lord, their God. The above passage informs that the Lord will reshape the landscape of the Mideast by eliminating the entire pricking briar surrounding Israel. Starting with Sidon, additional judgments come upon all those around them who despise them, alluding to Israel. Now, only when the pricking briar is removed can Israel truly dwell safe and secure as a peaceful people and continue without obstruction to build houses and plant vineyards. Now, at present, Israel is prevented from building and planting in the northern part of the country due to the constant barrage of Hezbollah rockets. In fact, Hezbollah is starting fires in the north, which hinders Israel's construction and agricultural industries. Here's a headline relatively recently that talks about fires have become the most visible sign of the conflict heating up the Lebanon-Israel border. Since May of 2024, Hezbollah strikes have resulted in 8,700, about 21,500 acres burned in northern Israel, according to Israel's Nature and Parks Authority. That's an AP article on July 4th of 2024. Now, however, with the pricking briar removed, Israel will find itself in the conditions described in Ezekiel 38:7, which is a land of unwalled villages, a peaceful people who dwell safely, all of them dwelling without walls, having neither bars nor gates. This means that until Ezekiel 28 verses 20 through 26 finds fulfillment, Ezekiel 38 can't happen. So now that we've finished the first Hezbollah prophecy regarding Sidon, let's explore the next two potential Hezbollah prophecies, which involve two other Lebanese cities, Gabal and Tyre, and they're found together in the prophecy of Psalm 83. Now, Tyre is still known by its historical name, but as stated earlier, Gabal is believed to be the modern-day city of Byblos. It is located approximately 50 miles north of Sidon. Like Tyre and Sidon, it is also a coastal city. The Sidon prophecy seemingly segues into the Psalm 83 war prophecy. Sidon gets judged first in Ezekiel 28, verses 20 through 23, and then all those other countries around Israel are likewise judged as per Ezekiel 28, verses 24 through 26. Sidon is not included in the Arab Confederacy of Psalm 83, which is probably because Sidon is likely destroyed just prior. Now, Psalm 83 is a prophecy involving an Arab confederacy of nations and terrorist organizations existing within them that seeks to wipe Israel off of the map. And their primary goal is to destroy the Jewish state and replace it with another Arab state, namely a Palestine. So let's take a look at the psalm just briefly, written by Asaph about 3,000 years ago. He was a worship leader for King David, but he was also a prophet, we're told, in 2 Chronicles 29:30. The plan of the confederacy is in Psalm 83, verses 3 through 5. So we'll read it. So, for behold, your enemies make a tumult, and those who hate you have lifted up their head. They have taken crafty counsel against your people, and consulted together against your sheltered ones. They have said, come and let us cut them off from being a nation, that the name of Israel may be remembered no more. For they have consulted together with one consent, they form a confederacy against you. Now that's the plan. That's a confederacy that forms a devious plan to wipe Israel off the map. They are a legitimate confederacy. We're going to find out who they are in just a moment, their identities. But clearly they are the Arab countries that have come to war with Israel in 1948, 1967, and 1973. We'll put faces on them shortly. But here's who we're told the identities are in Psalm 83, verses 6 through 8. We've got the tents of Edom listed first, and the Ishmaelites, Moab and the Hagarenes, Gebal, Ammon. There's Gebal we talked about, and Amalek, Philistia, and the inhabitants of Tyre. There's Tyre we talked about. Assyria has also joined with them. They have helped the children of Lot. The children of Lot would represent Jordan. It would also be Ammon and Moab listed above. Their goal, we're told in Psalm 83, verse 12, is they want to take for themselves the pastures of God. They want the promised land for themselves, not for the Jewish people. Now, the next image is going to identify who they are by their ancient names. This is their modern-day equivalents. You see the tents of Edom probably represent the Palestinians. I'm not going to read all these for you. You can take a screenshot of this if you want, but you can see their identities there. This clearly describes the assortment of surrounding Arab nations and terrorist groups that have been a pricking briar since Israel became a nation on May 14th in 1948. Okay, now let's go over a couple important observations. First one is that Tyre is identified as the inhabitants of Tyre. Now, apart from the tents of Edom, this is the only other Confederate member listed in a habitation condition. The tents of Edom likely represent the Palestinian refugees. Tents biblically can mean refugee conditions. Many of the Palestinians have descended from the ancient Edomites. This is an image from 1949, when the tents of Edom became a reality as a consequence of Israel's victory in the 1948 Arab-Israeli War of Independence. Now, some suggest that the 1948 war fulfilled Psalm 83, but the tents of Edom only became a reality after that war, nullifying the possibility that the Psalm 83 prophecy found final fulfillment at that time. Now, concerning the inhabitants of Tyre, the Hebrew word for inhabitants is yeshav, and it can mean a people who were set into place and enthroned and empowered to inhabit a location, which might allude to the emergence of Hezbollah, or a people that Iran put into place and empowered as their Lebanese proxy. Now, it's worth noting that the inhabitants of Tyre are listed directly alongside Philistia in this prophecy. Philistia with the inhabitants of Tyre. Now, Philistia represents the Gaza Strip, which is where the Hamas are based. Hamas is another Iranian proxy. Now, also notice that Gebal is listed in the same verse with Philistia and Tyre. As Lebanon and the Philistia area, Gaza area, proxies of Iran. Israel is presently at war with these two locations. Now, pairing Gebal and Tyre together suggests that not only southern Lebanon, Tyre, but northern Lebanon, Gebal, are joined in an attempt to destroy Israel, as per Psalm 83. Now, for more information about Psalm 83, I recommend my book that provides an exhaustive study on the prophecy entitled Psalm 83, The Missing Prophecy Revealed. Now, the book also has 2 teaching DVDs that are available separately in a bundle discount. Now, some teach that Psalm 83 is simply a prayer and not a prophecy. Others believe it has already been fulfilled. I rebut these arguments in a short online YouTube video that you can watch. You see on the display here, called Why Psalm 83 is an Unfulfilled Standalone Prophecy. That's available on YouTube. You can also read my article entitled Why Psalm 83 is a Prayer and a Future War Prophecy. That's at our website, prophecydepot.com. Now, since these resources are already available, I won't take any time to address the Psalm 83 objections in this article. However, the SIDON prophecy in Ezekiel 28, verses 20 through 26 is likely new to you, and the commentaries need to be presented and rebutted. So, was the SIDON prophecy in Ezekiel 28, verses 20 through 26 historically fulfilled? Most every commentary in existence states that this SIDON prophecy has already happened in history. The dominant view is that the foretelling found fulfillment during the reign of King Nebuchadnezzar II of Babylon. The secondary view teaches that it happened during the reign of Persian King Artaxerxes Ochus, Now, John Gill sums it up with this quote. John Gill's exposition, and John Gill lived between 1697 and 1771, and here's what he said about Ezekiel 28. In the midst of her by the sword, upon her on every side. This was literally fulfilled in Sidon, either by Nebuchadnezzar and the Chaldean army, which besieged it on every side, or by Artaxerxes Ochus the Persian, who took it and destroyed it. So now, before addressing these historical fulfillment views, it's important to be mindful of the reasons for and results from the Sidon prophecy. So in so doing, we can actually accurately assess these historical episodes to see if they fulfill the details of this prophecy. So the reasons for, by reminder, the 2 times in Ezekiel 28 verses 20 through 21 declares that God is against Sidon. But why? Ezekiel 28:24 tells us that Sidon is one of Israel's neighbors that is a pricking briar and painful thorn to the existence of the Jewish state. Now, these evil neighbors despise Israel and stand in the way of them expanding into a safe dwelling, house building, and vineyard planting nation. This has nothing to do with idolatry, which is what some commentaries suggest. Matter of fact, a case in point is that 300 years prior to Ezekiel's existence, Jezebel, the Phoenician princess of Sidon, was spreading her idolatrous practices into Israel and throughout the region. But again, this is not why Ezekiel says the Lord is against Sidon. So the results from the Sidon prophecy will be, Sidon will be soundly defeated in a military conflict that sends pestilence upon her, blood in her streets, and the wounded are in her midst. When it's all over, Ezekiel pronounces 4 times, then they shall know that I am the Lord. So now let's see if the historical accounts include the reasons for and the results from Sidon's judgment. We'll start with the King Nebuchadnezzar II of Babylon argument. We'll read from the Geneva Study Bible. It's one of the sources that advocate Nebuchadnezzar fulfilled this prophecy historically. Here's what it says: For I will send into her pestilence and blood into her streets, and the wounded shall be judged in the midst of her by the sword upon her on every side. Then they shall know that I am the Lord. That is Nebuchadnezzar. Now, of course, he's advocating there that Nebuchadnezzar was responsible for that. Another advocate of this view is Henry Halley, who was between 1874 and 1965. He writes in his book called Halley's Bible Handbook on page 390 the following: The overthrow of Sidon, 20 miles north of Tyre. It was taken by Nebuchadnezzar when he took Tyre. So he also advocates this. We're going to look at one more. This would be coming from Warren Wiersbe, who lived between 1929 and 2019. He also believes this was fulfilled by Nebuchadnezzar during the Babylonian period. Here's what he says: The people of Sidon despised the Jews and often caused trouble for them. But now the opposition would end. They shall know that I am the Lord God. Ezekiel 28 verses 24. Ezekiel makes this startling statement that God would be glorified in the destruction of the city, verse 22. How could the Lord be glorified in such carnage? Because it would demonstrate his holiness in rejecting false gods and punishing sin. The swords of the Babylonian soldiers would kill many people, and those who escape would die of the plagues that often accompany wartime slaughter. So Wiersbe is clearly saying Sidon despised the Jews, and God would demonstrate his holiness in rejecting false gods and punishing sin. He's teaching that Sidon's judgment would root out idolatry, and in the process would demonstrate God's holiness. He also says the Babylonian soldiers would kill many, and those who would escape would die of the plagues. Now, is there any biblical or historical evidence that Babylon soldiers of Nebuchadnezzar II actually killed many people in Sidon? You might be surprised to know that what the Bible and history says concerning this refutes this, and we're going to go there shortly. So are the Geneva Study Bible, Halley's Bible Handbook, and the Wiersbe Bible Commentary of the Old Testament correct? That the Sidon prophecy has already happened in history? Does this historical episode fulfill all the details of Sidon's judgment? We're going to take a look at this biblically and historically. So now let's look at what the God actually offered to Sidon at the time of Nebuchadnezzar II. Ezekiel's contemporary Jeremiah provides us with the details. I've highlighted in bold the important parts of these verses between Jeremiah 27 verses 2 through 11. I'm going to read them. They're all important, but I've highlighted the important parts. You can read them along with me, starting with Jeremiah 27 verses 2 through 5. Thus says the Lord to me, make for yourself bonds and yokes, and put them on your neck, and send them to the king of Edom, the king of Moab, the king of the Ammonites, the king of Tyre, and the king of Sidon, by the hand of the messengers who come to Jerusalem to Zedekiah, king of Judah. And command them to say to their masters, thus says the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, thus you shall say to your masters, I have made the earth, the man and the beast that are on the ground, by my great power and by my outstretched arm, and have given it to whom it seems proper to me. Verses 6 to 8 say, and now I have given all these lands into the hand of Nebuchadnezzar the king of Babylon, my servant, and the beasts of the field I have also given to him to serve him. So all the nations shall serve him and his son's sons until the end of this land comes. And then many nations and great kings shall make him serve them. And it shall be that the nation and kingdom which will not serve Nebuchadnezzar the king of Babylon, and which will not put its neck under the yoke of the king of Babylon, that nation I will punish, says the Lord, with the sword, the famine, and the pestilence, until I have consumed them by his hand. Concludes with verses 9 through 11. Therefore, do not listen to your prophets, your diviners, your dreamers, your soothsayers, or your sorcerers, who speak to you, saying, you shall not serve the king of Babylon, for they prophesy a lie to you, to remove you far from your land. And I will drive you out, and you will perish. But the nations that bring their necks under the yoke of the king of Babylon and serve him, I will let them remain in their own land, says the Lord. They shall till it and dwell in it. So basically, Jeremiah was given a warning message for the kings of Sidon, along with Edom, Moab, and Ammon, and Tyre, through their ambassadors who had come to see Zedekiah, the king of Judah, at that time. They came in the aftermath of Nebuchadnezzar's first of three conquests of Judah. The first conquest was in 597 BC, which opened the door for Zedekiah to become the king, Judah's king at that time. Apparently, these ambassadors came to inquire of Jeremiah about the future of their respective territories. God issued them all a warning, followed by a merciful offer through Jeremiah. The warning was, I have given all these lands into the hand of Nebuchadnezzar the king of Babylon. The offer was, but the nations that bring their necks under the yoke of the king of Babylon and serve him, I will let them remain in their own land, says the Lord, and they shall till it and dwell in it. So in other words, resist and be destroyed, or submit and be sustained, submit to survive. First note that these ambassadors did not come as pricking briars or painful thorns to Israel. Rather, they apparently came in a friendly, diplomatic effort to find out their territorial futures, thus they are not really being faulted as Jeremiah's foes, as Judah's foes, rather. Okay, now let's take a look historically at what actually did happen at the time of the Babylonians with Nebuchadnezzar II and their interactions with the Sidonians in Sidon. We're going to turn our attention to the pulpit commentary homiletics by W. Jones, who says, I will send into her pestilence and blood in her streets, and the wounded shall fall in the midst of her with the sword upon her on every side. This judgment by pestilence and sword could hardly be said to have been executed in the invasion by Nebuchadnezzar, seeing that Sidon submitted to him apparently without offering any serious resistance, thereby heeding, of course, to Jeremiah's warning in Jeremiah chapter 27. This is in alignment with the findings of the Associates for Biblical Research, which states Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, besieged Tyre for 13 years, but the precise historical facts of its outcome are still unclear. He evidently did not conquer the city, but it may have surrendered conditionally to him. These accounts are in Jeremiah 27 and Ezekiel 26 that spoke of this event. Apparently both Tyre and Sidon surrendered to Nebuchadnezzar, based on fragmentary Babylonian administrative document which mentions the kings of Tyre and Sidon as receiving rations from the royal Babylonian household. So thus, there is no evidence that my research team or I have found that supports the historical fulfillment of a bloody military attack upon the people of Sidon by Nebuchadnezzar II in fulfillment of Ezekiel 28 verses 23. Neither is there any biblical backing for the following. At the time of Sidon, Tyre, Edom, Moab, and Ammons, they were not a pricking briar to Israel. Rather, Babylon, not these territories and peoples, was the primary thorn in Israel's side. Moreover, in stark contrast to Jeremiah 27, which offered a warning to heed for Sidon, Ezekiel 28 does not offer no such warning. It doesn't present Sidon with a get-out-of-jail-free card like Jeremiah did. Ezekiel proclaims Sidon as part of a pricking briar is going to go directly into judgment, not escape judgment. Okay, now let's take a look at the other less popular argument for the historical fulfillment of the Ezekiel 28 Sidon prophecy, and this concerns the Persian king Artaxerxes Ochus in 351 BC. And in support of this view, we have a quote from the respected Bible prophecy teacher Arno C. Gaebelin, who lived between 1861 and 1945, and he writes in 1921 the following: "The judgment upon Sidon, some 20 miles north of Tyre, is predicted. For some years, Sidon was even more prominent than Tyre. She was burnt after a revolt against Artaxerxes Ochus in 351 BC, but later rebuilt." So he's advocating that Artaxerxes fulfilled this prophecy. But does the fact that the city of Sidon was burnt after a revolt against Artaxerxes Ochus, but later rebuilt, really fulfill the prophecies in Ezekiel 28 verses 20 through 26 according to the biblical text? Let's look at the historical account according to a quote from fandom.com, which says, "After this, Artaxerxes personally led an army of 330,000 men against Sidon. The approach of Artaxerxes sufficiently weakened the resolution of Tennis," that was the king of Sidon at the time, "that he endeavored to purchase his own pardon by delivering up 100 principal citizens of Sidon into the hands of the Persian king, and then admitting Artaxerxes within the defenses of the town. Artaxerxes had the 100 citizens transfixed with javelins, and when 500 more came out as supplicants to seek his mercy, Artaxerxes consigned them to the same fate. Sidon was then burned to the ground either by Artaxerxes or by the Sidonian citizens themselves. 40,000 people died in the conflagration. Artaxerxes then sold the ruins at a high price to speculators who calculated on reimbursing themselves by the treasures which they had hoped to dig out from among the ashes, and King Tennis was later put to death by Artaxerxes." So does the historical account of what happened to the city of Sidon in 351 BC really line up with the biblical text in Ezekiel 28? First of all, it's doubtful that the Sidonians would have equated the destruction of fire by Artaxerxes as an execution of the judgment of God upon them that would have resulted in him being glorified in their midst and them realizing that he is the Lord. Second, in the historical account, the city of Sidon was burnt to the ground and 40,000 people died in the fire, but nowhere in Ezekiel 28 is the destruction of the city of Sidon mentioned to be by fire. Now, Ezekiel 38:22, Obadiah 1:18, Psalm 83:14, and Zechariah 12 verse 6 are all future war prophecies that clearly identify fire as a means of judgment, but the judgment of Sidon is by the sword and plagues, or pestilence in some translations, and not by fire. The biblical text says that the Lord causes a plague or pestilence to break out at the time when there is bloodshed, and caused by what appears to be hand-to-hand combat against the people of Sidon. But why is there no mention of this taking place in the historical account in 351 BC? Also, isn't it reasonable to believe that the language of Ezekiel 28:23 seems to be more talking about the slaughter of perhaps thousands of people instead of hundreds? The historical account informs us that Artaxerxes Ochus had advanced against Sidon with such a formidable army that King Tennis of Sidon surrendered 100 and also gave him the keys to the city. And then 500 of the Sidonian elitists were also killed by the sword. Thus, only 600 distinguished Sidonian leaders were executed by the sword, which does not seem to fulfill the prophetic requirements of Ezekiel 28:23 that says, "And blood will be spilled in your streets. The attack will come from every direction, and your people will be slaughtered within your walls. Then everyone will know that I am the Lord. Lastly, Sidon does not seem to have been a pricking briar to Israel in 351 BC. In fact, there are some historical indications that Israel may have allied with Sidon in the Sidonian revolts against the Persians prior to this year. If Israel did align with Sidon, then this would mitigate against Sidon as a pricking briar at that time. Here's a timeline of Jerusalem that talks about 365, 364, all the way through 347. The various revolts. Judea participates in Egyptian-inspired and Sidonian-led revolts against the Achaemenids, and coins minted in Jerusalem are reflecting the short-lived autonomy. The Achaemenids are also known as the Persians. Now, lastly, I want to rebut the Alexander the Great argument. It's important to note that there were no commentaries that my research team or I found that even presented this argument as a possibility for the fulfillment of Ezekiel 28 verses 20 through 26. That's why I'm using the word a possible argument. But let's look at what happened historically between Alexander and Sidon. Here's a quote from the World History Encyclopedia. After defeating Darius III at the Battle of Issus in November 333 BCE, Alexander marched his army, about 35,000 to 40,000 strong, into Phoenicia, where he received the capitulation of Byblos and Sidon. Tyrian envoys met with Alexander whilst he was on the march, declaring their intent to honor his wishes. Moreover, we have this comment from Livius.org. In November 333, he defeated Darius near Issus and went on to take the Phoenician towns Ad-Ardus, Tripolis, Byblos, Bertus, Sidon, and Tyre. Except for the latter, being Tyre, all towns surrendered as soon as Alexander approached. In Sidon, he appointed Adabdolonimus as king in 332. The Sidonians supported the Macedonians when they besieged Tyre, but they also saved many Tyrians when their city was eventually captured. So notice that just like Nebuchadnezzar II, the Babylonian argument, Sidon likewise surrendered or capitulated to Alexander the Great. This fact of history alone makes it impossible for Ezekiel 28:23 to be fulfilled historically, since the biblical text says, "And the blood will be spilled in your streets, the attack will come from every direction, and your people will be slaughtered within your walls." So basically, like King Nebuchadnezzar, the Alexander argument falls flat because the Sidonians actually surrendered at that time. So after reviewing the historical arguments of Nebuchadnezzar II, Artaxerxes, Ochus, and Alexander the Great, I think it's safe to say that Ezekiel 28 verses 20 through 26 has not found fulfillment yet and is yet a future unfulfilled biblical prophecy. So before I conclude with my comments, I do want to talk also about the city of Zarephath in the book of Obadiah. Let's take a look at that to see if it finds application with Hezbollah in Bible prophecy. We'll turn our attention first to the Palestinian prognosis in Obadiah 1 verse 18. It talks about the house of Jacob shall be a fire and the house of Joseph a flame. Read that as the Israeli Defense Forces. But the house of Esau, read that as the Palestinians. Remember the tents of Edom in Psalm 83. They shall be stubble, and no survivor shall remain in the house of Esau, for the Lord has spoken. Now it goes on to say in verses 19 and 20 in Obadiah, then my people living in the Negev will occupy the mountains of Edom. Those who living in the foothills of Judah will possess the Philistine plains and take over the fields of Ephraim and Samaria. And the people of Benjamin will occupy the land of Gilead. The exiles of Israel will return to the land and occupy the Phoenician coast as far as north as Zarephath, which is in Lebanon. The captives from Jerusalem exiled in the north will return home and resettle the towns of the Negev. So what Obadiah is saying so far is that the Israeli Defense Forces are going to take out the Palestinians and the surrounding peoples, and they're going to annex territory. Here's what we're talking about here. They're going to annex parts of southern Jordan, the Gaza, the West Bank, the Golan Heights, southern Lebanon. We'll take another look at that. Those arrows are going there. That's going to become Israeli territory. And the southern Lebanon is what we're going to focus on. That is the Zarephath area. It is the modern-day city of Zarephath, and is a coastal city in Lebanon which, as you saw on the map, is located between the sister cities of Tyre and Sidon. It's only 11 miles south of Sidon. As a matter of fact, in 1 Kings 17:9, we're told that Zarephath actually belongs to Sidon. So in the aftermath of the Israeli Defense Forces' defeat of the Palestinians, as per Obadiah 1, verses 18, Israel will capture the city and possess it as part of their promised land. Like Tyre and Sidon, Zarephath is considered to be a Hezbollah stronghold. Here's how we can collect that information. This is an article back in 2013. It's the City News says gunmen still kill outspoken pro-regime Syrian journalists in Hezbollah stronghold in Lebanon. The article says on Wednesday he was gunned down with automatic rifles shot at close range in his apartment in the coastal town of Sarafan, ancient Zarephath, a stronghold of Hezbollah where he lived with his Lebanese wife, and the perpetrators got away. I'm trying to point out the fact that Hezbollah has a presence, a stronghold, in ancient Zarephath in modern-day Sarafan. Another connection, the Washington Institute in October of 2023, which is about a week after October 16th, about a week after Hezbollah engaged against Israel after the Hamas massacre. They engaged on October 8th. Hamas massacre was October 7th. Here's what it says. Will Hezbollah hold back or escalate? Remember, there were evacuations going on in the northern part of Israel as Hezbollah advanced against Israel in missiles. And there were also evacuations in southern Lebanon as Israel responded with cross-border attacks. The article goes on to say there was no systemized evacuation or request for residents to leave in the coastal towns such as Tyre or Sarafan or in Dania, Hezbollah's stronghold in Beirut's southern suburbs. So the point I'm trying to make here is that as of October 2023, a week after Hezbollah started attacking Israel, Sarafan was not evacuated. However, that might change soon if Israel escalates its attacks deeper into Lebanon. Someday Israel will capture this city. Could this imply that Israel will be part of the slaughter in Sidon and on their march perhaps conquer and capture Sarafan, ancient Zarephath, in fulfillment of Obadiah's prophecy? Now, we're not told in Ezekiel 28 who does the slaughtering, but Israel does need to remove the pricking briar of Sidon and those around Israel that despise the Jewish state. Only when Israel will be able to resume building houses and planting vineyards in fulfillment of Ezekiel 28:26, only then will they be able to fulfill that. So in conclusion, it appears that the prophecies we've looked at in Ezekiel 28, Psalm 83, and Obadiah describe future prophecies that may involve the Hezbollah terrorist group in Bible prophecy. Moreover, the fulfillment of Ezekiel 28, Psalm 83, and Zechariah 12, 2-6, may enable Israel to dwell securely, which will set the stage for the Ezekiel 38 prophecies to follow on the hills. We'll take a look here at Zechariah 12 in passing. Zechariah 12:2 tells us that someday the peoples round about, the evil neighbors of Israel, the enemies of Israel, will lay a final siege on Jerusalem and Judah. What it says is, behold, I will make Jerusalem a cup of trembling or dizziness or drunkenness, in some translations, unto all the people round about, the inner circle of Arabs around Israel, when they shall be in the siege both against Judah and against Jerusalem. Now that's going to be a bad thing for them, because what's going to happen is that they're going to be defeated by the Israeli Defense Forces, we're told in Zechariah 12, verse 6, which says, in that day I will make the governors of Judah, the captains, or read that as the Israeli Defense Forces of Judah, like a firepan in the woodpile, and like a fiery torch in the sheaves, and they shall devour all the surrounding peoples on the right hand and on the left, but Jerusalem shall be inhabited again in her own place. So we see that we're coming to a climax here. Could start with the destruction, the prophecies of Sidon in Ezekiel 28, maybe leading into Psalm 83, and then ultimately Zechariah 12 and Obadiah 1 could come into play as well. And when Ezekiel 28, 20-26 happens, Sidon and their pricking briar and neighbor allies will know that the God of the Bible is the Lord and the one true God. This spiritual realization by these Arabs is exactly what Asaph, the author of Psalm 83, requests. And here's what he says in Psalm 83, verses 13-18. petitioning God as to how to deal with the Psalm 83 confederacy. He says, "Oh my God, make them like the whirling dust, like the chaff before the wind, as the fire burns the woods, and as the flame sets the mountains on fire. So pursue them with your tempest, and frighten them with your storm. Fill their faces with shame, that they may seek your name, O Lord. Let them be confounded and dismayed forever, that they may know that you, whose name alone is the Lord, are the Most High over all the earth." The day is coming where this realization will come. They will know that the God of the Jews, the God of the Bible, is the one true God and not Allah. And this is what Asaph has petitioned for, and this is what's been mentioned in Ezekiel 28, verses 20 through 26. So thank you for staying with me in this teaching study. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I think hopefully you'll agree with me that the Ezekiel 28, verses 20 through 26 prophecy regarding Sidon and the evil neighbors is a future prophecy that we are to be on the lookout for. God bless you all.
Connecting the dots to the multiple prophecies in the Old Testament that reveal the future is not uncomplicated. But books of the Bible that were written over 2,000 years ago are coming to life today. Prophecies from the Psalms, Zechariah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, and Revelation share God's plans in detail, but organizing the timing of these end-time events require a lifetime of study and understanding of current events. And Bill Salus is the man to help us visualize the timeline that began in 1948 but seems to have accelerated rapidly on October 7th. Events have escalated in the last 5 months, and Israel is fighting battles on all sides from multiple enemies. The Bible tells us that all nations of the world will turn against Israel in the last days. And just recently, we've seen our own country attempt to remove Prime Minister Netanyahu from office, declare a unilateral ceasefire without Israel's participation, and limit the military help we provide to Israel. This cannot bode well for America's future. What fulfilled prophecy will happen next? An attack from Iran prophesied by Jeremiah? The destruction of Damascus from Isaiah's writings? The Russian and Iranian attack on Israel from Ezekiel 38? Leave it to Bill to paint a roadmap for us, taking us from October 7th all the way to Armageddon. He details his studies in both the Bill Salus book or the Bill Salus DVD collections. You have a choice of his books or his corresponding DVDs. The Now Prophecies, the Next Prophecies, the Last Prophecies, the Final Prophecies, the Millennium Prophecies, and the Future Prophecies. Either one is available for your gift of $75 or more, with shipping included anywhere in the USA. Call the toll-free number you see on your screen or visit us online at prophecywatchers.tv. For our international friends, please note that additional shipping fees will apply and all prices are in US dollars. We have 2 great technology options. Get both the books and the DVDs together on a flash drive that plugs right into your computer for the same $75 with free shipping and a surprise bonus included as well. Just ask for the Bill Salus flash drive package. Also, all of Bill's DVDs are available for streaming via our on-demand site. Simply go to prophecywatchers.com and click on the streaming tab to view these exciting messages from anywhere around the world. Thanks for your support and encouragement as we continue to warn the world of things to come.